Where did you first learn about business? Your first job in school? The first deal that you worked on? For me, it wasn't at NYU where I went to law school and which focuses on law and economics, or at NYU Stern, the business school where I also took some classes. It wasn't in a casebook or in a deal room when I was working at big firms. The biggest lessons aren't even in my role as fractional GC to various operating business. My first case study in business was Alice's Beauty Salon, my Nana's hair salon on the corner off of 56th Street in West Philadelphia, where I was born, not raised. Before I ever knew what EBITDA or multiples were, before I drafted or reviewed my first purchase agreement, I learned about waking up early, showing up for customers, maintaining a business operation, and taking care of your family through your own entrepreneurship from my Nana's hair salon. Here are three specific lessons that shaped me as a deal maker, advisor, and business operator today. I need you to imagine the salon, the corner row home near Overbrook High School for those who are familiar. A very vibrant, very energetic neighborhood with a lot of personality, but also some challenges, especially in the 90s, back when Philadelphia was still referred to as Philadelphia. On this corner in a rough but wonderful neighborhood in Philadelphia, my Nana's salon stood a storefront in the basement, the ground level of the house she owned. If you walked in the door, you would see white tile floors, always clean, well swept, and old school hair salon chairs, the spinny ones where people get their hair done. You had the dryers with the big domes over top. You had the shampoo sinks. And I can remember as a kid from my earliest memories, 2, 3 years old, sitting in the salon and watching my Nana hustle and bustle about, taking care of her customers and making money to support herself. This was my first exposure to what I now know is operations. It's why we watch the ops now. The first lesson that my Nana's hair salon taught me about business and entrepreneurship is that owning a business and operating it is a real day-to-day grind. It's not something passive or theoretical. I mentioned I watched my Nana wake up early and work that shop and take care of her customers. She ran the business successfully for decades. What's unique about hair salons and barber shops and these type of personal care service businesses is that they balance a line. To succeed in these type of businesses, the operator needs to be in tune with their clients emotionally and mentally, needs to be able to provide empathetic quality service that can connect with their customers, but they also have to be rigorous and have great attention to detail, discipline in the day to day, because it's a business with a lot of moving parts that are required for you to stay on top of in order to actually generate a profit. If you think about the business model, your revenue really depends on how many customers you can serve and get paid. And so, those two aspects of the business, the emotional, service based connection with customers, as well as the discipline operational aspect, they play hand in hand. And I saw my Nana navigate these two competing concerns adeptly, skillfully. As a skilled and disciplined operator, she made sure to be on time with appointments and to keep the whole system moving. She would put in the perm in someone's hair over here, then she would either go check on one of her assistants who was shampooing someone else, or she would go put someone else under the dryer. And at all points, her goal was to keep the process moving so that no customer was waiting too long, so that she could get people in and out. The more people she got in and out of chairs, the more heads that she did, the more revenue. I also saw her with her attention to detail, always keeping the shop clean, cleaning up the night before, after the last customer left. The other aspect, the emotional commitment and the quality of the service, also played out in that she had return customers, building long-standing, deep relationships with her clients, giving that personal touch, knowing what special events they had coming up, what was going on with their families. Her customer retention was great. She had customers of over decades. The quality of her connection, the loyalty of her customers also showed in that it was a cross-generational business. She was already a senior citizen when I was born, although you would never know because of how active and energetic and beautiful she is. So a lot of her clientele were also around her age, senior citizens. She had built such a good connection with these customers and provided such great service over the years that I saw generations come and sit in those chairs. Mothers, daughters, granddaughters. These lessons about the quality of service, about attention to detail in your systems and processes, and about building strong connections, personal connections with your clients are lessons that inform me as an operator and advisor today. My second takeaway has to do with missed opportunities in the entrepreneurship through acquisition space. When I think back to my childhood and my Nana's hair salon, there are a lot of warm, special memories of my formative years, a lot of happy feelings, but also there's a level of regret because in hindsight, especially doing what I do now, I see missed opportunities in how we handled my Nana's exit from her business. The seasoned professional, even when I was born, she successfully, because she was so good at that first point, being an operator and owner, she ran that salon successfully for decades, working for herself, living by herself well into her 80s. But as happens to all of us, she started to slow down. She started to face some health issues. And so that inevitable moment came where my parents and I had to gently but firmly persuade her that she needed to leave the house and her business behind. Now, this was around 2015 when I was both wrapping up law school and starting out as a first year at a big international law firm. And so I didn't have a lot of bandwidth to really be involved in structuring this process. My parents have 8 other kids besides me, and they also didn't have a lot of capacity to really structure this. So it ended up being a quick sale of the house and nothing more. I look at this with some regret because a big part of what I do at Cadet Legal now is advise people in lower middle market M&A transactions, especially as part of the so-called silver tsunami, where baby boomers, older professionals who've built strong recurring revenue businesses over the years are now looking to sell those businesses because their kids oftentimes don't want to take them over. A real recent example of that happened in Brooklyn at a Jamaican restaurant where my client, the buyer, was coming in to buy from a seller who had built from one restaurant to 7 locations and paid for his sons to go to college off of that revenue. And now that he was ready to retire and his sons were out of college, they didn't want to work in that business that actually funded their lives. Understandable, but a very common situation that older aging business owners are facing. That creates the opportunity that a lot of my buy side clients are taking advantage of now. They're going in and buying these businesses. And the structure that we use is one that now I kick myself because it could have been a great structure for my Nana situation. A structure where you have some seller retention. The seller doesn't sell 100% of the business. They keep a small portion of equity, let's say 5 or 10% or more, so that they're still involved in the business. They help the new owner with the transition. And that seller is able to then have not just a one off payment as my Nana got, but recurring revenue over the years because of their stake in that business. That was a missed opportunity that I think would have been perfect here. The model of seller retention and transition period especially made sense with this particular type of business because Nana's success was not just based on her skill as an operator, but also based on her value to and connection with that surrounding community in West Philadelphia. I mentioned that the neighborhood wasn't the best, even though I love it and have fond memories. But the thing is, my Nana's shop, because it provided a necessary, very respected service, especially in the Black community, hair care, and because of who my Nana was as a person and how she committed and invested in the community, both financially and relationally, generally speaking, that corner was safe and Nana was left alone. And she understood the needs of her community. So a buyer coming in would need to, in order to succeed, would really need to understand the community, the stakeholders in this business. This is something that we talk about a lot with our ETA buyers. When I talk about how my Nana shop highlights missed opportunities in entrepreneurship through acquisition, I don't just mean the missed opportunity we had for my Nana to have a share in the upside from her business. I also mean missed opportunities for current buyers who are going into neighborhoods or communities or businesses as outsiders and not taking a chance to partner with that seller to get the buy-in and the feedback and connection with all of the stakeholders and not just the stockholders in that transaction. When I talk about my Nana's success, I mentioned that a big part of that had to do with her people skills, with her connection with the community and with her clients. That leads to my third takeaway, which informs my practice and my advising today. What my Nana's hair salon showed me is that for certain buyers, for certain operators, clients like DK Smith and Co., shout out to Darian and Alex, the consumer space can be just as much of a gold mine in their hands as some of these other quote unquote boring businesses. Oftentimes, when buyers are talking about boring businesses and how excited they are, what they mean are businesses that provide necessary services or products such that even if there's an economic downturn or a recession, these businesses will still have demand, will still be able to generate revenue. So a lot of my business buyer clients looking for these type of boring businesses oftentimes are focused on B2B businesses, or if they are in the consumer space. By the way, what does consumer mean? When we refer to consumer, we're referring to businesses that sell services or products directly to individuals. Within the consumer space, there are subcategories: consumer staples, and then we also have consumer discretionary. So usually, if my buyer clients aren't looking at B2B and they are looking in consumer, they're still looking at consumer staples. The term consumer discretionary makes us think that these businesses are not as stable, are not as valuable as some of the more boring HVAC, plumbing, electrician, home services type of businesses. But my Nana Salon and other consumer businesses prove that this is not necessarily the case, prove that we should reconsider what kinds of businesses are the ones we want to go after in the consumer space, in the lower middle market. What do I mean? Even in economic downturns, businesses like my Nana Salon still make money. Even the people in the lowest income brackets, and I know because I've seen and experienced this, still take time out to get their hair did, to get their nails done, get their hair cut, even when there's economic uncertainty or downturn. And when you start talking about the upper economic classes, they also spend on consumer discretionary even during downturns. They spend on their hair care, their nails, but they also spend on luxury goods and experiences. The data supports that. So when we think about what a stable and safe, recession-proof, or at least recession-resistant business is, we have to realize that some businesses in the consumer discretionary space actually do fit. There's a recent example in pop culture of the prevalence and the value of the consumer discretionary space. Spoiler alert, if you haven't seen The Devil Wears Prada 2, I highly recommend it. Now, this is obviously a movie about high fashion, right? Well, yes, but wait. A deal nerd like me can't help but see that it's a movie about business operations and M&A, business opportunities. It's a story of a legacy industry, a vertical in flux being upended. You have characters working in traditional print media that are being replaced and have been replaced by digital media. You have writers, individual human writers, who are now facing pressures to use AI. Does this sound familiar? Very relevant to the modern context. And in this context of figuring out how to operate a business in a time of social and technological change, we find that the characters latch on to M&A as a solution to their problems. First, we have an issue of succession that oftentimes characterizes our entrepreneurship through acquisition deals. We have the owner of this big legacy media business passing away and handing the business off to his son, who has no interest or appreciation for the business. So he's immediately looking to cut costs and bring in tech and AI and consultants who don't appreciate the customer or the realities of the business. That's one model for succession, continuing a business into the future. But there are competing visions, competing growth strategies for this business in this movie. The characters, in order to avoid the slash and burn business strategy of the son, start looking for M&A partners. And we see two different type of buyers, the same type of buyers that we see in real life. We see one buyer who's a complete outsider to the industry, looking to take over and completely reconfigure how the business is run, bring in their own talent and not keep a lot of the legacy stakeholders, the employees and leadership from the last regime. The ultimate buyer, the alternative, ends up being a consortium of people. They aggregate capital, as a lot of my asset managers do, and they buy the business but keep in that same management team. They have that transition, much like the best version of these lower middle market transactions that I see happen. So yes, this is a movie about high fashion, which, by the way, fits into the consumer discretionary space and highlights the fact that there are business opportunities even in that consumer discretionary space, million and billion dollar deals. But it also highlights the way that a seller has to navigate different partners to their transaction. I hope you enjoyed learning a bit about where I was born and started out my life. Even though I was born in West Philly and moved to New York when I was 2, I spent all my summers and holidays there on that corner, and it still means a lot to me. These 3 lessons: what it means to be an owner operator and the daily grind that it entails, the opportunities in the entrepreneurship through acquisition space, particularly to leverage culture and community, and the opportunity for consumer discretionary business as we look at the lower middle market. These 3 takeaways shape how I practice law, advise my clients, and operate my own business today. If you are a family business looking to sell, but wanting to sell in a way that really cashes in on your years of hard work and protects your legacy, you should talk to us. If you are aspiring to become an entrepreneur through acquisition, through acquiring a quote unquote boring business, we would love to talk to you as well. And also, we challenge you: think about that hair salon in West Philly and realize that there are opportunities in the consumer discretionary space for the right buyers and operators. I hope that this story, most importantly, gives you concrete examples of how to watch the ops. I'm Denzel Cadet. Take care.